Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and happy New Year. I hope that you guys are doing well, staying safe, happy, healthy, and that you are off to a great start in this new year, 2024. It seems to be zipping right on by. Um, how did your holidays go, and how do you feel about the new year? Did you guys make any resolutions for yourself? Just a little bit about my holidays. I spent them in bed. Unfortunately, was sick over the holidays, and so that's one of the reasons why I didn't put out a podcast last week. My voice is actually still recovering, so I'm going to try to get through today's podcast without sniffles and coughing. And so, there's COVID is coming back around. The RSV, I think, is the virus, if I recall correctly. So respiratory infections. So those things are all back on the rise. So you guys get your booster shots if you believe in getting the booster shots for COVID, but definitely make sure you wipe down and spaces and um, keep healthy. So I'm a bit of a clean freak in terms of wiping down things, but I don't know. Somehow I got sick, which I don't normally do. So it's interesting. And being sick as an adult is very interesting because it's like, oh, boo-hoo, You kind of feel like a big baby, but made a big old pot of chicken noodle soup. Got my lemon throat remedy and all that kind of good stuff. And so we're going to rock on through since I am feeling a little bit better today. And I missed you guys, of course, as always. If you're new here, welcome. If you have been rocking with me, thanks for coming back and sitting with me. And you guys go ahead and get cozy. Grab your drink, grab your food, and let's wind it on back because I have a really special show that I have planned for you guys. I've been planning this show actually for a little over a month now. I've been thinking about it since last year when I had, a flurry of ideas. If you are a creative, sometimes that ideas and things just like come to you. And so I, have a notebook that I write things down in. I keep, copious notes on my phone. So, I've been brainstorming this show for a little while because things will like strike me at the weirdest times, like driving, so I'll take my notebook with me driving or, just eating or just in bed, whatever. But anyhow, maybe that's TMI. I don't know. But anyhow, today's episode that I wanted to chat with you guys about is male-centered women. And what a male-centered woman is women who keep men um, up on a pedestal. They revolve their lives around men. They feel like men can do no wrong in their eyes. And just men are at the forefront. They constantly seek validation and so on and so forth. But a woman just sort of follows a man blindly and supports him blindly. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because, as you know, this show is all about abusive relationships, unhealthy relationships. And I feel like women who are male centered, that definitely falls in line with narcissistic abuse. And I'm going to definitely dive into how what my thoughts are about that and what my line of thinking is about that. Um, and you may have many of my listeners that are women may listen to me, or even men who know of women may listen to me and may have experienced, being a male centered woman at one point in time, may still feel like they're a male centered woman. I have been a male centered woman at one point in time. And I think a lot of it has to do with how you're raised, societal standards and messages, and cultural messages and things like that that certainly hammer that into you, that right from the very beginning, it's like, oh, that's just what boys do, or that's just how men are, and or it's a man's world. Some of those common phrases that really just hammer that message into you that world revolves around man, or man holds all the power, holds all the consideration, or everything that you should be doing in your life should be for the benefit of a man, or for to benefit a man's well-being, or to even if you're a heteronormative woman. I can't tell you, especially, if you've been single, you may have been asked, like, are you still single? Or, if someone's been single for a long time, oh, she can't keep a man. So the idea behind that is, you as a woman aren't doing what you're supposed to do to keep a man. And so though there's a lot of old internalized misogyny that goes into um, male-centered women. And there's a lot of people out there with wisdom and insights that still have very male-centric views. For example, there was an interview that I saw, a snippet of an interview with Jan Van Sant, who is a relationship coach. Maybe it was last year, I think it was, where she talked about, no matter, what condition a man is in. Oh, it was Jan Van Sant and attorney, I want to say Ebony Wilson, but don't quote me on her last name. Where she was telling her that, like, if a man is a bus driver and you're a high-powered attorney, and he wants to date you or be in a relationship with you, you shouldn't have the, financial standards, or, you should just kind of take that relationship with him as is and continue to build that man up. And there's been a lot of messages recently around that, like, keep men at the forefront, build them up, support them. Tyler Perry also recently went on record. He's made a lot of money off the backs of Black women, dressing and pretending to be a Black woman in most of his movies. He was also one that went on record and said that, Black women especially should build a man up. If all he can do is pay a light bill, for example, they should be grateful and support. So those are some recent messages that have come out in interviews with celebrities. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any other recent news flashes or things like that came about recently. I can't keep up with everything. The world is just moving too fast, and there's not enough hours in the day to do all of the wonderful things that I definitely want to get to. But anyhow, let's dive into it and have a talk about it. And I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. But, in terms of the notes that I have written here, male-centered women. So male-centered women, they take on misogynistic views. They will engage in victim blaming. One misogynistic view is like, and this is one that like a way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Or like I had mentioned before about how, you have to do all of women are primed and conditioned to do all of these things to keep a man. So, for example, women are raised by their mothers, but sons are loved by their mothers. And so, what that means is a woman is taught from very early on as a young girl, especially Black women. We're taught from a very early age to learn how to keep house. So that means clean house, cook, work, yard work, everything, balance, finances and things like that. A lot of us are taught like household domesticated activities and then also maybe even primed to do like childcare activities very early and to make sure, assist our mothers and things like that. While sons are there's a lot of evidence that supports that sons or boys or men are primed from a very young age to be loved as is. They are encouraged to go out and play. They are encouraged to be robust and roughhouse and, do things and be free to do that without necessarily having to be taught domesticated activities or how to take care of a wife, if that makes sense. And so, women, the experiences that we go through are very domesticated. And even back in the day, which I don't think they really have it anymore, it was primed all the way through school where you would have economics class and homesteading classes and things like that where women were taught to sew, cook, and maintain the house, and that skill was sort of honed in school. And I think boys do workshop or wood shop and things like that, metalwork and things like that. And I know that that's diversified itself quite a bit, but there's still some of those lessons. And of course, there are exceptions to the rule. So, mind you, I know that every household isn't like this, but generally speaking, women are primed through girlhood on up to be mothers, to be wives, to take care of the house and the home and their partner. Um, Versus boys are not primed to necessarily do that, to maintain relationships with partners or to take care of partners, so to speak. And that can vary across cultures. There's also a lot of victim blaming. I've heard of instances where there's been infidelity. So if your husband or the man of the house cheats. Well, what are you doing to keep him? What's going on in your bedroom that he has to look outside of the home? And so there can be a lot of victim blaming about that. If you go through, if there's women in domestic violence relationships, and I work a lot with courts now, and so probably one of the number one questions that I'm getting asked, why did she stay if this person was so abusive to her? She, and there's that line of thinking that like it must not have been that bad, or she liked it, or what did she do to cause that? And that's not always, it doesn't necessarily always go down that line, but I am frequently asked, why did she stay? If they're being abused and it's that bad, why do people stay? That's probably one of the number one questions that I get asked for court. Um, so And that's something that I often have to explain in terms of, people stay for a myriad of reasons. It could be financial, it could be, the family is pressuring to stay, it could be lack of resources, it could be fear-based, if you leave an abusive relationship out of fear that your partner is going to hunt you down, track you down, and do more harm. Um, Okay, and so moving on to number two, male-centered women, especially mothers. And so we're going to dive into mothers here. Prefer sons over daughters. So again, I spoke about that a little bit in the first point, but I'm gonna, elaborate on that a little bit more. On that, you know, m- there are a lot of mothers out there, and I think there's a show on TLC. Um, and I can't remember the name of it, but I feel like the name of it is Smothered. So, but don't quote me on that, where it talks about how mothers like dote on, their children. And this is what I'm talking about here is when mothers dote on their sons and they speak about having little boys a little bit differently. And, having a boy brings them so much joy and pride. And then when they speak about having a daughter, there's a lot of disdain. She's troubled. She's hard to communicate with. She's hard headed. And she's, all of these, she's very problematic. Um, Whereas there is a lot of joy in terms of how they speak about their sons, and oftentimes they may want to be more overly involved in their sons' lives than they will their daughters when they're male-centered women. So they may want to be a grandparent to their son's children. They may want to insert themselves in their son's lives a little bit more and take and be the priority as opposed to their son's wives. So they want their son to prioritize their relationship with them. They want to be their confidant, their therapist, their mother, their wife, and there's just like this feeling of being enamored with your son, and like your son, it's like your son represents and you see this with women who are male centered. Their son represents everything, all the joy and everything that they wish they could have had in maybe their own spouse. But there is this preferential treatment in putting their son up on a pedestal, and their son you know, could commit every crime known to man, that is still going to be their golden boy, and there's never going to be any discipline. They're going to give endless amounts of validation and sometimes even finances and praise and support to their sons. And so their sons will always get preferential treatment with a woman who is male centered. And that would extend over to things like discipline too, right? In terms of their son oftentimes um don't receive any sort of discipline, or it's a much lighter discipline than perhaps other children in the family. um and then women who are number three, women who are male centered will cater more to men. And I noticed this a lot in, I worked in corrections, for several years. And, I noticed this a lot in any sort of uh, male dominated setting. When you have women that work in a male dominated setting, there's a lot of women, I won't say all of them, but there's a lot of women who enter into a male dominated setting, and they seek validation from men. It doesn't matter if they're married with children, have families, or whatever. As soon as they hit that work gate, it's almost like, whatever life I have outside of here doesn't exist. I'm here explicitly to flirt with, engage with, and put men up on a pedestal here. It's almost like it's like entering a toy store almost like for adult women. And so, they will sort of pander to a male's ego. Males get promoted fast. They flirt very openly with men in work settings, or they may give men copious amounts of praise, but they sort of bend over backwards and pander to men in these settings. If the man needs something or if a man doesn't want to do their work, then they may cater to them and allow them more time to get their work done or reassign their work to someone else to kind of take that on. And I experience it all the time in corrections where you know men may not show up to work, and so that work is shifted around. For also two women that were married that would come to work, and you can tell there's a lot more going on with their coworkers than what needs to be going on in that setting. And it's almost like a free for all because there are so many women who may be seeking that validation. Um, for men. And this is it doesn't even matter if you fall into the LGBTQIA, if you fall into that group of folks, but you still identify as a female. It's the same rule applies where they too are also seeking that male validation. They're looking for that approval. They're looking to fit in. They're looking to be given that high five, and that's all they do. And so that can definitely lead to those in-group, out-group distortions, or what we call the green wall of silence, is where, all of these people that are seeking this male validations protect these men in these male-dominated settings. And, that's where you have these incidences like harassment or workplace violence or incivility that happen, and no one wants to say anything because they may be um, crowding around and protecting these men at work. And I call it the good old boy culture. And if you've ever worked in a good old boy cultural setting, then you know what I'm talking about. And it's like if you're one of the boys, at work, you get away with anything and everything. They're not going to discipline you. If anything, the person who uh, told, the victim or the person who said something is the one who is going to get reprimanded or retaliated against. And actually, you may be retaliated against by a group or a gang of people at work that are all trying to protect this one person. Just again, that validation and that wall. There. So that's an example of that. And that happens quite a bit. I've seen that happen where people just it's better not to say anything. It's better not to even get into it or to just deal with like a few minutes of bullshit and get through the day because I gotta work and I don't want to make a headache for myself at my job because, it's just better to kind of go through it. And it's like sometimes when people would report things, they would call and report it to a confidential line. And, as soon as they reported it, you would know because whoever they reported it to would go around and sort of, it would spread like wildfire. And before you know it, everyone knows that this person attempted to make a report and, this and that and the other. So, those are things that frequently happen. And I'm sure, again, when you think about places like law enforcement, the military, and other places like that that are male dominated, also tech. Tech is another industry, and that I happen to work with quite a bit. Um, and I'll probably do, an episode on that, because there's also quite a few things that go on just in that industry alone. You know, um, male-centered women also choose men over their children or their family, and so these women are more likely to take care of a man. Before they take care of their own children and their families. It's one of a hill that I will die on is that I think that trust funds and child support, things like that need to be more heavily regulated. Money that parents get for children need to be heavily regulated and monitored, or a little bit more regulated and monitored. I can't tell you how many times I've known of women who will take monies and things like that that are meant for the care of their children and families and spend it on some boyfriend or someone that they just met, or working with a woman who may have moved a man into her home. And, a large part of my career was working with sexual predators. So you moved a man into your home, and that man has it turns out to be a sexual predator, and they may turn the other cheek or pretend like they don't see it, or they may defend that man for violating their child. They'll defend him before and get angry with their child when their child is trying to speak up about some abuse or something inappropriate that has happened. And you know, um, back in the day, and I don't know if this still happens, but I'm sure it does, but back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for, like, if you're, like, sitting at grandmama's house, or you're sitting in your mom's house, and, like, your uncles or whatever, or a large group of men are coming over, if you're a girl, they're telling you, you need to go back there and put on some more clothes. You can't be sitting out in your shorts or anything like that because men are coming over, as opposed to telling men that are inappropriate, as opposed to protecting the child and saying, you know what, you don't need to be here. If I know that you have a history of looking at a woman, or excuse me, a girl or a child, um, in a way that's inappropriate, then you don't need to be in my home because my child comes first. And so, again, the idea would be that you cater to men first, and you need to protect their wandering eyes from looking at you, because if you had on shorts or if you showed any skin, then you would be considered the problem there. And so that's the thing. But yeah, that happens a lot where children are victimized, or their resources are depleted, because women prioritize male attention over that. The other thing, in this, and I think I've spoken about this before, but the one case that comes to my mind is, you know, um, Susan Smith. And the reason that she comes to my mind in terms of male validation is women, again, who prioritize men over their children when they're dating. If you're dating a man that says, you know what, I don't want children, I like, if she has children, we can never be in a serious relationship because you have children. And so Susan Smith comes to my mind because, as you may or may not know, her case became famous when uh, she went on national television and said that a black man had abducted her children. She was in South Carolina, but she had actually driven her children into a lake and drowned her children. And the reason behind that was because she wanted so badly to be with this man who did not want children. And so she was willing to get rid of her children, essentially, to be with this man because she was prioritizing that and wanted him that badly or wanted a relationship with him that badly. There are women who, they look for male validation wherever they go. So they may be, and I say this, and I'm trying to say it in the most sensitive way, and I recognize that people have personalities. But there are people that may be overly flirtatious and sort of talk in a way that's a leading manner to get to be the center of attention and to get that attention wherever they go. And it's very similar to what I was talking about before in terms of what happens in the workplace, where you have women that can be over the top, flirtatious, and suggestive towards male attention to get that attention, right? And conversations can quickly become inappropriate, regardless of if they're married or if children are in the room or what have you. They're just seeking that validation and getting that attention wherever they go, and that becomes their whole identity. And these are the types of women that do not have friends. And you want to watch out for them if you feel like you are becoming a friend to them, because in reality, they're not friends with you. So these are women that may have friends or connect with you under the guise of friendship to until they get a man or someone that's interested in them, and then they sort of drop you like a hot potato. Or, the entire friendship revolves around them talking to you about every man that they're interested in. And this could be, someone, when they're frequently interested in a man, once a week or every night a week or whatever. It just sort of every conversation that you have is always revolving around them being interested in a man or them trying to work things out in a relationship with a man. And they're sort of seeking that. And a lot of times, men that they're talking about um they don't necessarily have great relationships with men, so they're not talking to you about good quality, healthy, wholesome connections, friendships, or networking. They're usually talking to you about men that they're sleeping with, men that they're sort of chasing, men that is not treating them well. And so they're oftentimes talking to you about toxic relationships that they're chasing and romanticizing and hopefully wishing that it will turn into something more when it's obvious that it won't. So hopefully that paints a clear picture for you there. And that becomes their whole entire identity. And it's like, damn, we don't have anything in common, or we don't even connect with, or have conversations without you talking about this, or without you sort of, us going out and you making it your mission to get a man's number or this and that all the time. Right. And so, you know, other women who are male centered take on men as projects and priorities in life. And so these are women who will quickly, I called it, a build a man workshop. Women who will quickly move men in, clean them up, and give them everything that they need. And sort of, their whole life is designed around caretaking and sort of, picking up the worst case scenario, and sort of making it their mission to clean this man up. This man could have addictions of many kinds. This man could have trouble maintaining stability, either mental stability or financial stability with keeping a job. This man may not have a home. This man may not have credit. This man may not have family. But this woman's mission is to sort of take this man up, give him all her love, and her whole identity um, is built around this codependency of building this person up, and making that her life's mission. Um, and if that man should get better, um, and suddenly become a normal, functioning, healthy man, um, more than likely she's going to have challenges around that, because there's not going to be as much of a need for her to be a crutch. So he can't lean on her for support like he's used to doing. And so that kind of takes away from her identity. So she may sabotage and do things so that this person, and disrupt the status quo so that he can then become dependent on her again, because that's what she's most comfortable with. So women who are also male-centered do not hold men accountable. And so, these are men that, again, I've worked a lot with predators or people who've committed violent crimes over the years. And it is astonishing to me how many women do not hold men accountable or will continue to support them through piss poor behavior. So, an example of this may be, something like with Bill Cosby, with all of the things that he had allegedly done, and he got a lot of support around him. But even still, people, and again, working in corrections, you see it all the time where, people commit violent crimes. They may commit infractions while in prison. And I can't tell you how many times there are mothers, wives, sisters, and people that are just sort of, supporting, offering this unwavering form of support through people who have committed things, these violent infractions. And while it's true, many people can change. While it's true people can change, what I will say is a lot of times when you are dealing with sociopathic or psychopathic people in prison, before they came to prison, they do not usually change that. And so they usually keep the skills of manipulation, stalking, being a predator even while they're in prison, and that skill can actually grow quite a bit. But again, people have this unwavering support, even if that person has committed violent crime, against a family member. So that's just one example of, how they don't hold accountable, and they don't hold them accountable, and it's just like this unwavering support. Well, that's just my son, and this and that. And even with myself working as a professional in criminal justice, I can't tell you how many times I've had a man's mother call me. And when you work in criminal justice, you work in corrections or anything like that, you're not supposed to have any interactions with people who are involved in the justice system, right? But because I guess you can call it a public figure, or because, my business information is public, people will reach out, and there's not too much that I can do about it. But I can't tell you how many times a man's mother has called to advocate on his behalf, or they feel like they need to tell me something. And even though I report it and they get into a world of trouble, they're still willing to take that risk, to advocate on behalf of their son, or, their whomever. But normally, my experience has been with mothers. And so it's always interesting to me that a man's mother will die on a hill, um, doing, essentially committing crime or getting herself caught up, on behalf of her son. So that's always been interesting. Um, women, who give men multiple chances after these men, don't treat them well, right? Men who are, they don't hold them accountable, right, for betrayals, infractions, injustices, but they don't hold men accountable, and they essentially let a man run amok and do anything. But they will cut a woman off, right, in a heartbeat, right? They may cut a woman, whether that be a relative, whether that be a friend or whomever, they will cut a woman off or will fight a woman or, you know, get into heavy conflict with a woman over the smallest infraction, but um they will not they will not confront a man, or they will take give them copious chances. They will not speak out about a man's abusive behaviors either. And they'll just sort of silently stand by and continue to turn the cheek, or not say anything, or talk about it behind their back, but then offer that unwavering support to that man's face. So and then this is a new one, and this one is very I don't know, this is like one of those things that is like very interesting to me that I've seen. But women who propose to men, and, I get it. And, I know a lot of people are saying, well, this is a new age, and, this and that. And I hear you, but no. Women who propose to men, or who get down on one knee, no. That is women who are chasing, who are pursuing, and that is out of biological order. Even if you go and watch Animal Planet, um, you know, male species are designed to pursue and woo women and to court them. I don't, if you're in a homosexual relationship, gay, lesbian relationship, then, this may be a little bit different for you. But if you're in a heteronormative relationship, that is the tradition of order. And so when you are proposing to a man, you are chasing him, you are making him the center of the universe. And it is now your job to pursue and woo and then become the man in that relationship. And that is very strange to me. But anyhow, lastly, what I will say is, and I mentioned this before, but I'll hammer this last point in: male-centered women, especially mothers, run interference in their sons' lives, and so they will fight their sons' battles or injustices for them. They will give up, their homes, their finances, their own relationships, to fight, to run interference in a man's lives, their husband's lives, and or something like that. And so where you will run that interference so much that you give up your own identity. And if you ever hear like a woman that says, I don't know who I am anymore after they leave a relationship, a lot of times they have relinquished their identity for the man that they're with. Um, and that man is now on a pedestal, or that man is now the center of their universe, and their whole lives are designated to doing whatever needs to be done for that man, fighting their battles, taking care of his home, cleaning, doing everything. And so I just wanted to throw those points out there. Um, you know, and I invite you that if you are a woman who is male-centered, or you notice this about yourself, idealizing men, chasing men, seeking validation from men, or if you know of someone that is, I would highly, highly encourage therapy, right? Because I think it's not good to put anyone on a pedestal or center your life around someone like that, especially if there's children and things like that that are involved. I would highly encourage you seeking out some professional support around that. And seeking the help of a professional that can help you work through if you have misogynistic views, if you have biases, if you do tend to victim blame, and things like that. Um, or even if you're willing to, risk everything in your life, risk your marriage, your family, and everything else. And in my field, I've even seen people who are willing to risk their and have risked their professional license for validation for men. And you run into that quite a bit in corrections where people are, doing things that are illegal um, for the validation of an inmate. And because they've started an illegal relationship with an inmate. Um, and if someone this is a true fact, if someone starts a relationship with an inmate, they are supposed to be arrested and considered to be a sex offender. So there are people that are willing to do that, have done that, gotten pregnant, and risked everything for that. So that's another little tidbit there. But I'm gonna stop this show here. Let me know what your thoughts are, what your experiences have been with male-centered women. Have you been a male-centered woman before? Have you encountered male-centered women before? How has a male-centered woman impacted your life? Let's talk about it. If you're on YouTube watching this, definitely be sure to pop that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. I do check those out. Subscribe, share, leave a review if you're listening to this on the podcast. I so very much appreciate it, and I'm glad that we're rocking together in 2024. And so until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and be well.